Bigfoot.
Bigfoot. I don't know why I leaned into the mic. I'm sorry.
Bigfoot.
After a year, the long-awaited answer to the burning question, we all got Bigfoot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that...
a year.
Almost.
It was at least a year, because what was it? It was...
No, we did it.
Post it like in the fall, though.
Yeah, we recorded it in the summer. I didn't post
Half a year. Let's say a good half a year.
A good half year. Okay, yeah. So we'll go for that.
Whatever. Okay.
So Harry, tell me about the salt shaker.
Oh, frig. Here we go. This is quicker than I expected. Okay. I was thinking about how to start this earlier, and I had an idea, and it's not in my head right now. All right, so some background for the 6 of you that are going to hear this. Hopefully more, but we'll see. 6 is a modest start.
Probably less, honestly.
You audience, Mike. Knock it off. Lexi's the only one that's going to hear this. So Shane and I, several years ago, he and I were sitting as we did from time to time. So we were sitting there chatting about whatever. I think this time we were outside, and our conversations there specifically swayed. They kind of weave their way through a lot of different topics. One of the ones that sticks out to me was one we actually had inside in a booth talking about
it was
quantum mechanics.
Yeah, quantum mechanics.
And
I'm pretty sure that's the first time like you ever like learned anything about it.
I had heard a lot. I hadn't had anything explained to me. You know, it was one of those things where it's like you see it on like the Science Channel, or it's like, oh, this is really, what the heck is this big? And, you know, and you're like, I don't know, 15, 16, and just, I don't have time for that crap.
Entering the quantum realm, that's all you hear.
Yeah, literally. Now, it's like after one official semester of philosophy and 4 years of study on my own, it's like, oh, this stuff is all of a sudden very interesting. But all that to say, we were sitting outside, and I don't know the full context of the discussion we were having, but it kind of made its way into a point where I looked at him and I picked up a salt shaker that was sitting on the table, and I said, all right, I want you to tell me the difference inherently between me and this salt shaker. Now, this was at least, I think, 3 years ago.
It was definitely a while. I don't know if it was
at least 2. I think at least two. Two is a safe bet.
Yeah.
And we picked this back up a couple weeks ago at Lexi's place, sitting in her living room at near 2 a.m.
I fell asleep.
She did.
Those are always the best conversations.
Blame her.
Our 2 a.m. conversations are always the best.
Yeah.
I didn't fall asleep because it was boring. I fell asleep because I was tired. Just to say that.
We'll give her the benefit of the doubt on that
one. Promise.
So we picked it up there, and one of Shane's last comments of the night was, yeah, we need to have a podcast episode about this. So here we are. Now, I will repeat the question because I've been talking too much already. What is the difference between me, and you could substitute you, Lexi, any person, we'll start with people.
Yeah.
What is the difference between a human being and a salt shaker? Now, I don't know if you care to, take a guess at where I'm going with this. I know we talked about it a little bit, but I don't want to run into that until we kind of...
So, whenever you pose that question, the first thing that comes to mind is just, the difference between us, what gives us the purpose of life, and
What do you mean by purpose? Meaning,
I mean what gives us life? What helps us become the opposite of entropy, to where we create things and hold things still?
Okay, understood.
So how come I am able to be here and talk to you and a salt shaker can't?
Yeah.
And besides the obvious, lack of a brain, it's just what is it about a salt shaker that makes it to where it isn't capable of doing anything by itself, let alone breathing or whatever?
Okay. I hear you.
So I feel like that's the kind of concept you were getting at. And,
in a loose sense, yes.
Yeah. So if I were to have a direct answer for that, my answer would just be, it's not carbon based, because, every single living thing on this planet is carbon based. We haven't found anything that isn't yet.
Oh my God.
There's theories that, silicon based life could be a thing, but we don't have that yet. So being that a salt shaker isn't carbon based, that's why, but it's obviously a lot more complex than that, because, a diamond isn't alive, even though it's entirely carbon. But yeah, that's kind of the only thing I can take a guess at, but I feel like you're going to get weird and philosophical with it.
Probably. And a very brief disclaimer for, the 6 of you out there. We'll just assume there's only 6 of you ever.
We know who you are.
I would say 4.
The vote of confidence from the back of the room here is really encouraging. Thank you. Thank you, Shane's girlfriend.
Leave a comment down below if we should get rid of the audience.
There's a window right here. She could fit. Who said that? So, for a brief disclaimer for the 6 of you, or 4, whatever, that'll be hearing this. We talk about this kind of stuff a lot. Like Shane mentioned before, our 2 a.m. discussions get very interesting. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I sit here and I think like, wow, on the outside, this could sound like the most useless thing to consider ever. And I could give you a number of examples of different things we've talked about, but we'll stick with the salt shaker one. What the frig does that matter? Well, I approach this from this perspective, and I'll keep it brief. Life is far too short for a short answer. What do I mean by that? If you're going to engage with somebody in discussion, you don't, reality, okay, which we are a part of, whether we want to be or not, you are, I'll use the term mechanically, we are a part of reality, right?
Yeah.
And you can't remove yourself from that. That's something that shouldn't even need to be said.
Well, yeah.
But it helps to lay out the simple alongside the complex when you're, dealing with stuff like this. So I approach this from this perspective. Like, life is too short for a short answer in the sense that to kind of just give a simple answer that's something like, oh, well, it's just because it's the way things are. No, that is a waste of your time. It is not honoring the person you're talking to by caring enough to really kind of think alongside them. I've spoken to some people where they would consider that kind of stuff like almost insulting to one's intelligence, where you kind of, in conversation, I try and lay out the simple just so we have a level playing field. And it's like, no, it's quite the opposite. I want to honor the person I'm talking to by making sure we both understand what our terms mean that we're using, right? So when we're walking into the salt shaker thing, like this is, it's a real question. Why is it important? Because I'm inherently physical. So is the salt shaker. We can start from that baseline. I'm physical. I have mass. I am made of matter.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. No, it's only me. You're not. Don't say that. No.
I am God. I don't exist.
Likewise, the salt shaker is made of matter. It has mass. So that's our baseline. Now, we apply a lot of what would be referred to as categories to that. And that might sound like a flippant term. No, that is something that would be used in philosophical debate. They are categories. We categorize the atoms. Some of these atoms are when they come together in certain combinations, they're gases. Or, I'm sorry, when they have a certain composition, they are considered gases. They are liquids. They're solids. Sometimes they're plasma. There's a whole...
All right, well, those are states of matter, not...
Well, yeah, but what I'm saying is it's like the properties of these particular molecular structures, when they come together en masse, this is the way they act, and we categorize them as gases, like an atom of helium.
Yes.
Or a helium atom, I should say. Like, that's what we would say. We classify that as a gas.
Okay, I get what you mean.
So it is easy to take those categories and give one of those short, simple answers, and I'm really oversimplifying this, but it's for the sake of discussion, and just say, oh, it's just gases, it's liquids. We understand the properties of these things. We know that they're different by, these different degrees and these different aspects. They're dissimilar from each other in these ways. They're, you could say, congruent. Okay. Lexi's making strange faces. So give me a second here. I said this to Shane before we started recording. I'm running on about 3.5 hours of sleep, so the brain's working.
It's okay. I can cut the silence. It doesn't matter. No one's going to hear this.
In an inherently physical world, if the world is only physical and that is it, what we would call a naturalistic worldview, we have to look at it and say, okay, here is one mass of atoms that, a proton and a neutron have a fixed... how do I say? I'm going to try and define myself as I go a little better.
Yes.
They have a fixed subatomic structure. Like the number of components and the type of components that make them up are fixed.
2 up and 1 down, and then 2 downs and 1 up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you are to take the 2 ups and 1 down of a proton and add to it, it is no longer a proton. It is something different.
Yeah.
It will behave differently. It will be affected by what we would refer to as the 4 fundamental forces differently.
Yeah.
So, and that's not a small thing. That's very important. Now you go out from that and you realize that, you don't realize it. Forgive the terminology. You look at matter itself, and all of it is composed of this. Everything is protons, neutrons put together, different, what's the word? Hello.
Like configurations, combinations.
Yeah, amounts was what I was going for.
Yes.
But those amounts are then, of course, with electrons in different configurations and that sort of thing. Do you want a thing?
No, I'm good.
You're good? Okay. Pardon me.
It's more or less just dry throat, not sore throat.
Pardon. Well, that's what they're for. They're not for sore throat. These
all right, yeah, I'll take one.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on.
Thank you for the Ludens.
Ludens. You're welcome.
But we can be Ludens. You know my email.
Ludens, you want 6 more loyal customers? Don't listen to Lexi. She has no hope. It's 6, I promise.
4.
Get out of here. So the 4 fundamental. What is it? So it's the strong nuclear force, electromagnetism, gravity, and
the weak force.
That's what I thought. It's the weak force. Okay. I didn't want to just assume that, but I thought that was the case. Those combinations, like I said, of subatomic particles are, to construct a proton and a neutron, they're fixed. If you change that, you don't have a proton and a neutron.
Yeah.
So with that, there is a fixed. Now, you can take this and you can say, oh, when more atoms begin to interact with each other, the balance of these forces changes. I'm talking about, for this context, a single atom.
Yeah.
The balance of those 4 fundamental forces from an atom of helium to an atom of, I don't know, pick something.
Neon.
So we'll go with neon. Again, helium and neon being categories, being descriptors, not so much. Not so much.
Stop distracting him, gosh.
So they're categories, that's all I'm going to say. In that relationship between the single atom of helium, we'll say, and those 4 fundamental forces, I understand with the number of electrons and the number of protons and neutrons, that will change. But acting specifically, and that, excuse me, that is true likewise, not only with protons, but with neutrons as well. And now those things, I say that because when you start putting those together, I understand the interaction changes, but in these fundamental units, it's a fixed relationship. When they begin to interact with each other, these things start to change. The balance of forces will shift. Now, when you get different composition of atoms, different types of atoms coming together en masse, you have that balance changes, obviously. The reason I'm saying all of this and repeating myself at least 3 times is to try and struggle here to drive the point home. All of the atoms that make up a salt shaker, we'll say it's full, just to add some complexity. A full salt shaker, whatever categories we apply to that, regardless, it's still a mass of atoms. That mass of atoms is still subject to those same forces, albeit at a balance than the human body. And it is easy to jump into the idea of complexity. Like, one of the first things you think about when you hear, like, what's the difference is, well, human beings are far, 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 far more complex. Forgive me for not looking at you all the time. I'm trying to think and stuff.
Dude, I don't care. Just do your thing.
I feel like a jerk. Stop it. So
they can't see that you're not looking at me. They don't care.
Dang it, you're right.
You are a jerk, actually.
I'm going to fight his girlfriend. It's easy to want to jump right into the category of, it's the complexity. Complexity is a huge thing here. What I'm trying to say, I said this perfectly before, and now that we're on mic, it's not coming out right at all. Those masses of atoms are still subject to those same forces, yes, at varying degrees, but there's no new forces that are coming in. A different way to maybe go about this that I think is a little easier is a corpse versus a living human being. And someone might assume I'm going for soul here. That's not the case.
Yeah.
I'm staying away from that. I am working from, let's perform an internal critique.
All right, I get it, Mr. Christian boy. People die and they lose 10 pounds. What's that about?
21 grams, actually.
21 grams.
I was just listening to Joe Rogan, which is funny. People complete sidebar for a second. People rag on him a lot. It's worth your time. He's not. He's made out by media to be very political, and he's not. He gets on a lot of people of a lot of different persuasions and just asks them questions. There's some things about him that frustrate me.
So have you ever tried psilocybin before?
Well, since Joe started talking about it, I've been thinking about mushrooms a lot. But anyway, he was talking to some guy. I don't think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson. It was... But the joke was that, 21 grams, man, that's a fat soul. That just made me laugh. But anyway, so a corpse versus a human being. Immediately, if I ask you, like, why is one alive and one's dead, there's going to be reference to electrical impulses, transition of sodium and potassium. I think it's sodium and potassium across the myelin sheath of the neurons.
Yeah.
Which, if that's not happening, the neurons aren't firing. So there's no impetus for motion in these, what we might refer to as the mechanical structures of the body.
Yeah.
Muscle contractions and stuff like that.
If you really want to get into it, like not as like a huge tangent, but just like kind of talking about it. So yes, the body has died. There's no... Stay off your phone. No.
I cannot believe you just did that. Oh my gosh.
The podcast. I'm just here.
But yeah, so like the body has died, so the mind no longer works. With that, heart isn't pumping anymore. There's no more blood, whatever. So yes, the person has died, but they are not devoid of life quite yet. Like,
okay,
you can still call them alive in some aspect, because like a lot of people, or not people, a lot of doctors, because they're not people, will say that...
Of course not.
You've heard of like the microbiome before?
Yes.
So they're basically saying that our gut is more of who we are than we are.
Yeah, there's some percentage, there's like a ratio of...
Yeah, because like...
I know what you're talking about.
There's more bacteria in our body than there are ourselves.
Yes.
So like I would almost say that it's like a more gradual thing, because while your mind has died inside your body, life is still going on for at least another couple of days, if not weeks. So like that's where it's just like, us, if I were to die, obviously Shane Horn talking would no longer be able to, but the body is still technically life for a while.
And that's... I don't want to cut you off.
No, I was done with it.
Of the thought. I don't want to interrupt you. I want to get back to what you just said, because I think it's interesting, the differentiation you just made.
Yeah.
I, Shane Horn, have died, but my body continues living. And yet prior to, in that statement, you're talking about the mind has now died and there's no separation from the mind and the brain.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. And it is something that, people think of philosophy as and I don't call myself a philosopher. I think there's some connotations that come with that.
2 semesters in community college. One. You're Socrates.
One. And then... And admittedly, 4 years following of sincere, like, at work lectures from some of the most world-renowned speakers, and reading, papers and articles and things written by these same people and a lot of different people. The only thing I really didn't do was just write essays, but I wrote a lot on my own, breaking down some of these ideas. So I'm not calling myself a professional. Please don't misunderstand me. It's just, I've invested a lot of time in this and I really appreciate it. The only reason I say that is because I think it's very important. That's the whole gist of it. If I didn't think it was important, I wouldn't have done all that.
Yeah.
All that to say, the reason I bring that up is because if you learn anything in an intro to philosophy course, that one of the first things you will ever hear about is the mind-body problem. And it's funny how there are 2 groups of humans. You get, I'll call them philosophers to keep it broad, but I think the term in and of itself is a bit of an oxymoron, love of wisdom, and yet some of them act very foolishly. Yeah. It's like, okay, what are you really getting? So, but we'll say philosophers in a broad term, and we'll say, again, keeping it very broad, I understand it is not an accurate description of all of the scientific community, okay? But I'll say scientists for now.
Scientologists.
Oh, don't get me started. That ridiculousness. And if differentiation is necessary as we go within the groups, I'll do it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how there's 2 different perspectives in the majority, I would think, and from what I've experienced with people who are professionals in this field, both personally, one-on-one, in-person conversations, and hearing testimony of individuals who are world-renowned I don't know, medical professionals, chemists, nuclear physicists, astrophysicists, the list goes on.
Yeah.
There is, even if it's not necessarily their field of quote unquote expertise, there's an assumption that there is no division between the mind and the body. They're one and the same. What you would call that is a natural part, that is a component of a naturalistic worldview. There is nothing beyond the physical.
Yeah.
Now, what that isn't implying, when I say that, it's not implying God. It's not inherently implying, inherently implying a spirit per se. You don't need to necessarily go right to those words.
Yeah.
All it is saying is they are, in a naturalistic worldview, there's nothing beyond the physical at all. And I'm including the physical forces, of course, in that that interact in our universe. Mm-hmm. That's it, right? So the philosophers, the grand majority, though I think the balance has begun to shift a bit, but that might just be those that are most publicly perceived. So I don't know 100% of that.
That's usually what it is.
Yeah.
Like the vocal minority will make it seem bigger than it actually is.
Yeah. And you may very well be right. In this case, that could just be it. But I will say it this way. Publicly, the perception is shifting, which I think is very significant, obviously, because if publicly the perception is shifting, the public is thinking one idea more than it is another. That's important. Ideas have inherent influence. You can't just let them go and say, "Oh, look at the bird. There it goes. It's not part of my consideration anymore." They're there. Mm-hmm. They are there, and you can't. We have this idea that a debate is an attack on someone else, especially in our day and age. We've talked about this a bunch. How frustratingly stupid it is that anytime you disagree with someone honestly and you respect them as you do it, and you try to be gentle, but true to what it is, how do I say this? The position you have adopted. You're trying to remain within that framework, but to extend to them the offer to discuss. Why do we do that? People think it is like, I had a debate with this person, and the implicit assumption is aggression.
Yeah.
Or we disagreed, and so I don't like you. You see that so much, this I lost the word. This sudden growth of just identity politics, and I don't mean literally like, politics in the country, though that is a big part of it. I mean social politics. Yeah. My worth is wrapped up in, I'm going to use some examples that are just big in the world today. I'm not saying this to you. I'm saying this to people that are hearing, whoever, the 6 of you.
Don't look at me like that when you say it.
Back on track.
So yes, internet shouting matches.
Yes.
Go on.
So basically, to use some of these examples that are very common in the world today, we see it in the federal political mess that we are in as a nation. We see it socially. My identity, people don't necessarily say it this way, but it is very evident in their actions. And there are people that are far more articulate than I, who spend far more time thinking about it, that can break this down a lot clearer than I can. But if you're familiar with identity politics at all, it removes the prominence and necessity of primarily recognizing the individual, and then from there noticing connections between individuals. Like some of the big ones you hear today, I'm gay, right? And it's
about time you came out with that.
I felt the comments coming from across the room. Here's another one, right? And this is they can't see me, so they don't know, right? Or my value. Again, this is not what is explicitly said. But when you take the time, it does not matter what your background is, and you honestly look at what is written, what is said, what is done following those presented ideas, and the goals that are pursued, there is a focus on an attribute about which many people will gather, will congregate around this idea of themselves, and they then find their value there. Now, they will not articulate it that way, but one of the big things, like I said, it's like, I am a homosexual, or my value lies in the fact that I'm African American, right? Or my lack of value, someone will accuse somebody else of saying to them, you believe, though they don't know them, that my lack of value as a human being lies in the fact that I'm an African American. That's one of the biggest discussions going on in our nation right now.
Yeah, that's the kind of shit that I hate.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And what's scary is that it's not within the past 2 years, that discussion specifically. And it might sound like I'm going back to civil rights. No. This idea of this focus, this heavy pushing into of what is commonly referred to as identity politics, what I like to refer to as the demolishing or the deconstruction of the individual, has been going on in great strength since before Trump's presidency. And you cannot blame one or the other. Everybody's at fault across the board. People have done some things worse than others. That's a given fact. We're not here to talk about that, but it's all to say that this sudden increase of the breakdown of the individual and the construction of the individual, Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot, the taking on of real responsibility, of pressing into the hard thing, and all these things are building you. But and this might sound wrong in the sense of what's the right word here? Not self-aggrandizing, but like just being selfish.
Yeah.
Being too selfish. Like you're pressing in to establish yourself as a person first, and in knowing that if you do that, it will be to the benefit of others. And if they likewise are doing that, it is of mutual benefit, right? That is, now of course there's a lot of defining that needs to happen in there about what real benefit, objectively good pursuits are, objectively useless pursuits. That breaks into the defining of what a human being is, back to what I talked about, the mind-body problem. Yeah. And that's where I'm going. I haven't lost track. This is kind of the scenic route to get back to the idea. Rather than the construction and the establishment of a strong, focused, critically thoughtful, which does not have, I'm not saying this to you again, just to the third or the fourth chair, I guess. Lexi's the third chair. Being critically thoughtful or thinking critically, all of a sudden now has gained a rather negative connotation, again, in the popular view. The unfortunate thing is, it seems that in our nation, a lot of people like to attribute that to the political right. And they say, here, the bigotry and all these things come with critical thinking. You want an example of that? Go deal with critical race theory. It is terrifying. But again, we can talk about that later. I'm just going to seed the air with that. Critical thinking is necessary. That sounds like something I shouldn't have to say, but unfortunately it seems we do need to say it. It's like saying common sense apparently isn't all that common.
Yeah. I was just about to say that too.
You cannot live a life. You cannot adopt or believe anything if you cannot think critically. Excuse me. What do I mean by that? You think critically about everything. It's whether you do it well or not.
Yeah.
Now, I say this the same way as like human thought, right? Like mechanically, human thought is the same. If then, that is the way human beings think at the most fundamental level. If this is true, then this must logically follow. But that change just carries on forever. The content can be anything. I mean, look at the world. Look at the diversity in the world. Of course, the content can be anything. Mechanically, however, it's the same. And why do I say all this following the mind-body problem? I say all of this because there is this like ignorance, and by that, the act of ignoring, not lack of knowledge, but ignoring may produce lack of knowledge, this ignorance of the nature of reality. If people are going to assume, actually it's a presumption, or a presupposition, I should say. If people are going to hold to the presupposition that there is no differentiation between the mind and the body, it's strictly physical, there's a lot of questions you're not asking. Yeah. And those questions don't necessarily relate immediately back to that initial question. Is there a difference between the mind and the body? The mind and the body. Are they the same, or are they two separate things? They begin to, as you ask that first question and you begin to move out on that chain of if-thens, that tree, they begin to cross paths with other thought disciplines, we'll say, which build upon those. Or if they're under objective analysis, clear, right objective analysis, they may serve to deconstruct false, invalid, we'll say, ideas that if you didn't do that, you would never get there. So it is not so simple, and I'm not ragging on science, please don't misunderstand me. I'm using this as a single example. You could go from any number of groups here, but if you were to simply just assume the nature of things without investigation, that doesn't sound like real science to me. And again, I want this to be clear. I'm not just saying it to you. I'm not ragging on them. But the sad thing to me is that some of these most prominent voices in the scientific community, who the general public would see, I don't mean like prominent, journal publishers or like paper folks that are producing all these studies and writing papers, I don't mean them like big voices in the scientific community. I mean like who the general populace is hearing. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what matters. Because they're the ones that, again, ultimately are deciding where their money's going, where their attention is going, where their efforts are going, what they're going to stop doing, what they're going to start doing, what they're going to choose to believe, and what beliefs they're going to abandon for true beliefs. That's important. And so many of these most prominent voices, when they talk about this, there's just this assumption that there's no difference, that explicit truth coming from their mouth is that the world is inherently physical. I am not here in this conversation to just present the claim that it's not, though I do believe it isn't. I want to enter into that worldview of naturalism and say, okay, does this stand up to scrutiny?
It is the kind of thing that I have been thinking about a lot more recently. It's just like,
how would you define recently? I'm curious.
Like within the past couple of months. Like generally, I've thought about the whole separation of mind and body thing for years, but like I find it interesting to myself only because of how worried I get about it. Where like we talk about existential stuff all the time. I don't feel existential dread consciously anymore. Like we will talk.
Can I stop you for a second?
What's
sorry.
Up?
How would you define existential dread in your context?
I guess it's just like the unsureness about what I am, if you know what I mean, like what it means to have a mind.
So let me try and explain what I'm hearing you say, just in that one sentence,
yes.
And tell me if you think I'm hearing you right. Would it be acceptable to say that you would define existential dread as, it sounds very self-explanatory, I know, but lack of assurance about your, I think we might separate purpose and existence, but they're inherently intertwined. But I think one is a presupposition. So what you are, I think you basically said it right. I was going somewhere, I'm sorry.
It's not necessarily about purpose. It's just about like what I am. And like, death is always another thing where like, I'm not worried about death. Okay. I'm not like afraid that I'm going to die. Cause like, common phrase, there's only two things given in life, taxes and death. Yes. And it's just like, I'm not afraid to die. What my whole thing is like trying to figure out what's going to happen when that does happen.
Death.
Yes.
Yes.
Cause we have the conversations all the time. I am a man of science mostly, but I dive into other things. You're mostly a man of religion, but you dive into like the science fields too.
May I provide one correction?
Okay.
Swap out the word religion for faith.
Faith. Okay. Yes.
We'll talk about that in a later discussion.
I get what you mean.
It's
yes.
just important.
Poor choice of words. But yes, you're a man of faith that dives into science. I'm a man of science that dives into faith. Which is why like I love our conversation so much because we're not heated debaters. Yeah. We just talk about this kind of stuff. But anyways, like the thing that I find the most interesting is that like, again, I don't normally feel like the existential dread because like some people are just like, they hear that the sun's going to explode in 13 billion years, and they're just like, oh, fuck, this doesn't matter.
What am I living for?
What am I living for? I don't feel that stuff. But a kind of thought experiment that I give myself all the time is like, I'll do this at work while I'm driving, sitting at home. It's just like the thought pops up, or it's just like, I have my mind. Mm-hmm. I know what it's like to be alive. I know what it's like to see and think and smell and all of my senses.
Okay.
Going into like a light form of the death feeling is trying to imagine what it's like to be blind. Because I've heard people talk about this before. When they're the type of blind where it's just like their eye is completely gone out of the socket, yes. Like that kind of stuff. Like, obviously it doesn't have to be, but like there's no nerves working there. Yes. The way they describe it is what I find so hard to grasp and understand.
Yes.
The way one person said it is, what are you seeing out of your elbow right now? You don't.
No perception.
There's no perception of anything there. Yeah. I find that hard to grasp. Yeah. And then I start to go on thinking about like, what is it like to be dead? And it's like, I can imagine myself, going, seeing the light and everything, but it's just like, once the body dies, if there is no afterlife, because I'm going with the presupposition that no, there is no afterlife.
Yes.
That's just the way I think. What happens when you die? Mm-hmm. I've had multiple theories that I've thought up before. Is like, how when you're in a dream, time can move by slower or faster. You have no concept of time when you dream.
Yes.
You have a dream that feels like it only lasts maybe 5 minutes, but you were asleep for 8 hours.
Okay.
I have the theory that when you're like on your deathbed, like, or on the table, you're dying.
I'm listening. I'm just going to check something.
Your brain speeds up.
Speeds up. Okay.
Yes. So like when you hear like some people, it's just like, oh, they died on the table, but were brought back to life. And it's just like, I saw the gates of heaven. I was there. I met all these people.
Point on that when you're done.
Yes. There's many different things with just that sentence, but it's just like, they were pronounced dead for 2 minutes, and they can tell you that they were up in heaven for a couple hours. Mm-hmm. My theory is that when you go towards death, your brain will speed up.
Processing,
speed up processing. I would theorize infinitely, but there would have to be an endpoint because you do die eventually.
Brain activity will cease.
So theoretically, you could be living an entire afterlife that lasts for 1,000 years within the last, millisecond that you were alive before brain death. But then it's just like, I have that theory, but then again, what happens when you die? Now, not only is there no perception of your senses, there's no sense of the mind. That's the thing that, I'll just be thinking about as I'm going about my day, and then I feel my heart sink, and it's just like, that was an interesting reaction I just had, because I think about that sort of thing all the time. Mm-hmm. And then there was another point that I had besides just the existentialism of death. The theory of reincarnation.
Yes, we've talked about this.
Yes. I've come up with other theories on it since the last time we actually spoke about this sort of thing. One kind of fun theory that I had is just like, how only some people are able to, quote unquote, remember their past lives?
Yes.
My general theory to explain that sort of thing is that our soul, our consciousness, isn't just transferred between humans, it's transferred between any single living thing on this earth. And you can
incorporating that into plants, like what I believe to be a classical reincarnation. Okay.
Yes, so plants, bugs, cats, fish, doesn't matter. Anything living, you share souls with them.
And amoeba.
And then, no, exactly, I brought up that one too. And so my theory is that you can only remember the memories of your past life, literally the one step before you. And now thinking about, there's only a handful of people that can actually recall things from their past life. Those are the lucky few that had a human as their past life. Because you think about it, there are trillions of ants, there are quintillions of bacteria. Your chances of coming back as a human are next to nothing. That's just my general theory.
Interesting. New to me.
But then thinking about that whole thing is like, if reincarnation is a thing, I cannot remember my past life, obviously. And that emptiness behind me and the thought of emptiness in front of me to where all of my experiences that I'm having right now, I will not be able to remember if I do have a last life or next life. That's another thing that gives me that sort of like existential like heart sink where it's just like, okay, that's a deep thing to think about, So like these are just things that I've had going on in my mind for a little while now. I wanted to like keep it down or like jot it down in some sort of format.
So you've got it there.
To listen back to again. And so other people can hear kind of what's going on in my head.
Yes.
I want to know if anyone else has experienced that sort of thing.
Which I think is extremely important.
Yes.
For obvious reasons.
Yeah. Because again, I'm not afraid of death. It is going to happen. I can't prevent it. Maybe I can put it off for a little bit if I, eat healthier so I can have a couple more years on the end of my life, but it is going to happen.
Yeah.
So I'm not afraid of it. I'm just afraid of what happens afterwards because it's the fear of the unknown.
Okay.
That's the biggest thing that I feel like everyone deals with, the fear of the unknown.
It's interesting that you classify that way. Okay.
Yeah. Whether it's you can't see the thing that's in the dark or we can't see the thing that's on the edge of the universe, What is out there? And not knowing that is what's scary.
Yeah.
That's kind of just what I wanted to like get out.
No, and that's exactly the root of everything that I was just getting at, because it is easy and it is comfortable. And we have to be very honest with ourselves. It is more comfortable, to walk forward in your life assuming that everybody dies. I mean, obviously they do. That's not the assumption, but I mean beyond that.
Except for Keanu Reeves.
Oh yeah, he'll be alive forever.
I was going to say Betty White, but then that
happened. So we don't know at this point. Everybody dies, and that's it. People would commonly refer to that as nihilism, which is, you put it very simply. I mean, Nietzsche, I believe, was the initial proponent of that. And if you don't know how Nietzsche's life ended, it is worth your time. The man was the son of a preacher who was the son of a preacher. He was, of course, an atheist. And he died. And I want to be clear that I'm bringing no further implication in this statement than just what I'm telling you. I just want you to have this information. I don't want, people listening to think I'm trying to imply something as though it's got value. No, I just want you to hear it. I think it's important. Nietzsche died raving mad. And in his moments of lucidity, do you know what he would do?
What?
Perfectly quote scripture. Hated it all his life. And when he was insane, I believe it was his mother and his wife? There were two female figures who were intimate, characters in his life. I don't remember exactly what the relationship was. But I believe they put him up in an institution, if I'm not mistaken. And they had to watch him degrade, which is so sad. Yeah. And to especially like, and I want to stop and I want to look at the life experience this man had just for a brief second.
Yeah.
You live your entire life believing that it is worthless. Now, he does talk about, value in human beings and having to live that way and respect other people. And I'm using very general terms here, but he doesn't just he's not saying live your life as though, everybody's worthless. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But it's dealing full on, making the truth claim, a claim about the nature of reality, again, of which we are a part, whether we want to be or not, that says that there is no inherent meaning at all.
Yeah.
It is useless in the end. And he slowly imagine what happens if that is your mindset and you slowly begin to degrade into madness. Just take a second and think about what the mind might do as it begins to break down and the echo. And what's amazing, what's very interesting to me is the two things that he dealt with at the end. It's very interesting, and I'm not delivering to you an implication, but it needs to be considered, and it does have weight. There's significance in the fact that the two things he's left with His moments of insanity, he's raving. But when he has moments of lucidity, he's quoting scripture. Now, I'm not saying he believed it. That's not the claim I'm making.
No, yeah, I know.
I'm not making a supernatural claim. That's not at all.
Yeah.
But I think it is not something you can simply, I don't mean you anybody, the fourth chair, the third chair even. Dang it, Lexi. It's not something you can just overlook. You don't have that freedom. Why do I say that? Well, this comes back to the nature of the presuppositions of, again, I may have made a mistake in using what would be referred to as a hasty generalization, a logical fallacy, and saying scientists at large. But I think the classically isn't even right. How would I say this? Following the Enlightenment, following the secular Enlightenment in Europe, which translated over into the West here in the States, there was following the Enlightenment in the 18th century, moving into the 19th. In Europe, carrying over into the States, there was a shift from a fundamental assumption that God, though undefined at great measure, following the Enlightenment, there was a shift from what was both in the general populace and in the academia, a fundamental assumption that God, though in many cases either loosely or undefined, existed and was the source of all that is. Widespread atheism or even agnosticism is very new in the context of human history.
No, it's still extremely uncommon.
It itself is not a new thing. I mean, if you want to, I'll deal from my context. You want to go back through Scripture, the Bible, and you deal with accounts of atheism and agnosticism. You deal with all of that. So it itself is not new, but it being this popular in the grand scheme of the world is very new. And that's interesting. Yeah. And it came in a large way. I mean, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, the West has a very massive influence on the rest of the globe. I would say a dominating influence on the rest of the globe.
Yeah, I would argue
in many ways. Not in every way, but in many ways. And in a lot of ways that have a serious impact. Now, when you're dealing with this fundamental shift in thought from, we'll say, loose deism to staunch atheism, that doesn't just rock one nation. That rocks the globe. Yeah. That is not a secluded influence to a people group in like England, right? No, it translated into the United States. Why? Because those human beings who have those ideas, who think about them, who defend them, who analyze them or don't, travel. And guess what? Human beings talk to each other. And because of those conversations, minds change and aims of life change and someone's self-proclaimed purpose in life changes. That's a fundamental part of a human being.
I saw like a video on, I can't remember where it was exactly. I think it might have been like I came across it on Reddit or something. Okay. Where it was a clip from a news, like a TV like news interview. I believe it was like somewhere in Egypt was where it was from. And it was a man.
This is fairly recent?
Yes.
This video? Okay.
Yeah. It, like just looking from it, it was probably within like the past 5 years, maybe.
Okay.
Where you mentioned, people travel, people talk, people change minds.
Yes.
It was two, like, it very clearly wasn't a foreigner talking with like one of the guys that was from there. It was like two Egyptian dudes.
Okay.
And the conversation they were having was they had a man on as a guest because he was atheist.
Interesting.
Yes.
Were they, I'm assuming in Egypt they were Muslims?
Yes.
Okay.
So like
Lexi is a very small population over there.
So Lexi can speak from experience too. Like the vast majority of the country is Muslim, with a very small portion being anything else, right?
I think the actual statistic is 98%
yes.
Egypt is Muslim and 2% is not.
Yeah.
That's
so
correct.
like
I just saw those the other day. Yeah.
I would almost go again to say that like 1.9%, that remaining 2% is what's Coptic, and then the remaining like 0.1% is anything else.
Extremely small.
Extremely small, which is why they had this man on the news, because he was atheist.
So this was a news broadcast?
Yes, news broadcast.
Interesting.
They were interviewing him. And I remember watching the short clip, and obviously the whole thing's in Arabic. They had the captions and everything. Yeah. But it just goes to show how set in their minds that most other places of the world are, because the man that they had on to interview barely got to talk at all. Because
really,
yes, the interviewer, the guy that's from
doing the interview,
the one doing the interview, the one on the network, he was just why? How can you think like this? And the man was just I believe in science and everything and evolution and blah blah blah. And he's like, you can tell that he was kind of new to the idea, because he was doing the very basic ideas that everyone else talks about. This
atheist guest.
Yes, the atheist guest was talking about the basic things. He's like, well, yeah, I believe in the Big Bang and evolution, and I just don't believe that there can be a God.
He said he was Egyptian as well?
Yes.
Okay. It seemed?
Yes.
Okay.
And the guy is the atheist only gets to say a couple of words, and the man is just I don't understand how this can happen. This is a disgrace. You can't call yourself Egyptian. Yeah, going hard into it.
That's an ad hominem. Beyond that,
it is.
That's sorry, not to interrupt you, but just that's important, because some people out there will recognize that as an extreme logical fallacy. Number one, number two.
Yeah.
That's not how you have constructive discussion.
Well, yeah, I know, but
that's also not what debate is.
This is all to say that the true staunch atheism thing is still it feels like it's getting more popular, but it's still a super vast minority in the world. And if you try to bring that idea to most other places in the world, you're going to get a lot of lashback, just because even if it's just the thing where it's just I'm a Christian in a Muslim country.
Yes.
That's going to have issues.
Certainly.
But to outright say there is no such thing as a God, that is always going to be an issue for many people. And I can imagine how bad it must have been back in year 10, when Christianity, or just religion in general, is the thing. The fact that the church is the law,
Lexi looks like she has a comment. When you're done, I want to answer that.
As being Egyptian who isn't Muslim. Oh, sorry, I was.
Please speak into the microphone.
As being an Egyptian that isn't Muslim
and
who has also been to Egypt, you can just tell by being there that it is religion is a huge deal in the country.
Yeah.
And Muslim women have to cover their faces and their hair, and they can't just walk around. And walking around with my mom and my sister, we got a lot of weird stares, and we were treated differently just because we weren't Muslim.
Didn't you say that there were a couple of times where people were questioning where your man is or something?
No. It's just that usually women aren't by themselves in Egypt, and it was just because we were just women by ourselves without a man, they were trying to haggle us a little bit when it came to prices for things. When we were trying to buy souvenirs, or even when we were trying to go to a museum, there was a tourist price versus
a citizen's price.
Exactly, a citizen price. And my mom, she speaks fluent Arabic. We even have Egyptian birth certificates, and they would not give us the citizen price.
Really?
Yeah, we had to pay the tourist price. And even though we are American citizens, so technically we were tourists, but it was just such a huge deal, even when we went to go see the pyramids and stuff. So they basically, if they see women by themselves, they take advantage of them, not in the usual sense. It's just they try to scam you pretty much and get more money out of you.
Just treating you differently.
Yeah.
Just essentially. And
just because we didn't have a man there to stand up for us, they thought we couldn't stand up for ourselves.
Yeah.
What's interesting, not to dive too far into this, because I want to get back, Shane, to what you were talking about.
Yeah.
It is. Have you ever read, both of you, any portion of the Quran at all?
No.
Take the time and do it. And I mean, do it. It's very interesting. And if any of the 6 or 4 of you are practicing Muslims, Don't take offense at anything I'm about to say, please. That is never my intention.
Yeah, no, none of this is ever meant to be offensive. It's just like talking about things.
Yeah, you know? And I think our conversation makes that very clear. I think the nature, the demeanor we adopt. I try and be very particular with my words, though. Again, 3.5 hours of sleep will mess you up. But just to make it very explicit, we're not here to beat anyone down. Let me be completely honest with you. As Shane said, I am a professing Christian. My life, unfortunately, that's such a loose, stupid word. My life is a very crappy example of that, and it's a shameful thing for me, but not. This isn't a pity party. I only say that because
you beat yourself up too much. Come on.
I only say that because I want it to be evident that coming from that fundamental perspective, not fundamentalism, coming from that fundamental perspective of me as a human, a lot of connotations come with that, like, oh, you must hate gay people, right? You must, I don't know, pick a stereotype. I'm sure there's a lot of them.
You're not allowed to mix fabrics.
Wait until marriage.
Yeah, all of that. Well, yeah. Basically, you must hate gay people, right? Like, oh, you think everybody that has sex before marriage is disgusting.
I bet you're racist.
Yeah, that's one. That's one. I think I've heard that one before from somebody who thought I was an absolute jerk in high school. And they said, wow, you're one of the nicest people ever. I always thought you were just angry. And I was so confused. She was like, you just look so angry. I'm like, do I really?
Wait, who was that? I think
Asaya. No, sociology class.
No, it wasn't. Oh.
Other people have said similar things.
There has to be somebody else.
I did one time. But, sorry. Probably
I'll bleep it.
It doesn't matter.
I'll bleep it.
As though he's ever going to hear this.
Government.
But regardless, all that to say that just folks understand that we hold no animosity towards anyone. And I mentioned debates earlier. A debate, you can wage war against an idea. Don't wage war against a person and their character. Now, if you wage war against an idea and it calls into question, subsequently deconstructing that idea out of sincere care, desire for the objective benefit, and for the recognition of truth in another person because you want what's best for them. If that subsequently produces a challenge to character, then so be it.
Okay.
But all that to say that none of this is meant to be hateful. Now we carry on. Disclaimer done. What's interesting is I say talk about reading the Quran because, Lexi, your experience in Egypt, even that one time, more than one time, but you get the idea. And that one, we'll say the pyramids, right? That one event, and then, women aren't, on a broader sense, women aren't really out a lot on their own. They have to cover up. That's a more clear, it's a religious norm. That's a religious prescription. It is, and I'm sure you would agree with this quite off the cuff. It's very clear that those ideas, now if you're dealing with a religion, that religion pulls from a source text. Anyone across the world that has gained any ground, except for New Age spiritualism, especially here in America, which is a different discussion. It's also very scary if you really think about it. The ones that have lasted for thousands of years have source texts. That's where they pull all matters of faith and practice is an expression only here. All matters of faith and practice are pulled from a source text. Yeah. You get that sort of situation in Egypt because of the Quran's doctrine. Now, the reason I made the comment earlier to the 6 or 4 of you, if anybody out there is a Muslim, please don't take offense. This is an analysis. It is not an attack. I don't believe analysis and attack are the same word at all because they aren't. People make the claim all the time that Islam is a peaceful religion. And it is like they get angry with you if you say otherwise. Right. And if you've ever read the Quran, there's no change in prescription for the modern day regarding what needs to be done to people that don't believe. Kill them. The things that Muhammad, the prophet, is allowed to do with little girls and little boys. Okay.
Yeah, well, wasn't the thing like he married like a 12-year-old or something?
If I don't have it in front of me, I don't want to try and quote it, but
Yeah.
I would like, do I have a copy? I have a copy of the Book of Mormon. I want to get a copy of the Quran and do some studying.
Oh, I love that play.
But all that to say that, you know, it isn't. The truth claim, because it is a claim about reality, you know, of which the religion of Islam is a part. The truth claim that Islam is a religion of peace is simply false. How do we know this? Well, the only source text you have for faith and practice of the Islamic faith is the Quran. And if you're going to go there and you're going to do an objective analysis, that's what you end up with. Now, why am I saying that? I'm saying that to come right back to what the frig we were talking about, this unexamined, completely just choosing to the ignorance thing. You walk through life choosing. You choose. It is not accidental. You make the choice to ignore reality.
I just want to know what this has to do with the salt shaker.
So, this might have to be a two-part. I'm sorry.
Yeah, like we're officially over the hour mark.
Oh, frig, really?
Yeah, we're at 64 minutes now.
Wow. Okay. Well, shut me up whenever you want to. I know you have a time limit, so just let me know and I'll stop talking. It's this ignorance of reality. It's choosing to not ask questions. It's like you mentioned the word presupposition, as did I. You presuppose things about the world. How often do you honestly subject those to critique?
Oh, I do all the time.
And as it should be.
Yeah.
And it's making sure that it is an honest, thorough critique of your presuppositions. Now, if you don't do that, no wonder people get upset when you disagree with them. Because they believe that their value, though they won't articulate it this way, they believe that their value is stored up in in this attribute of me, right? Like I don't need to say it again. Nobody's receiving hate here because there's no hate being given here. It's an analysis of social, of
except
reality.
for you, Adam.
Number 5. It's like the critical race theory. How did I freaking end up back here? Just part of one of the claims that it makes is that racism is beyond a systemic problem. Children are born that way.
Yeah.
I want to do a lot more reading on it because it is a very current issue. It is, though you hear about it in the news, it's not, I think, by the general population, a very well understood thing. And yet it's being pushed by major academic institutions. It's being taught in law schools as fact. At best, it's being presented as a possibility, as a theory, critical race theory. Mm-hmm. Government officials espouse the idea as truth. And it is also being taught in curriculum in elementary schools.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I've seen it in college.
In Washington, D.C. and other, well, Washington, D.C. is not a state, but in other states around the nation. Now, let's stop and let's consider that. You deal with academia, right? These are people you would hope, people that are in grad school, even undergrads, if they care enough about the world and their life and thinking critically about everything. I can understand it being there. Things like that have happened throughout human history, especially, again, following the secular Enlightenment. What scares me to death is that it is a dirty, weaselly thing to shove it into the youngest grades.
Yeah. That's the thing that I find really weird.
And I mean, I want you. There's children's books. There are children's books written. What is the guy's name? Oh my gosh.
Ben Shapiro.
Oh, most certainly not by Ben Shapiro.
He writes children's books. Or wait, no, is that Ted Cruz? One of them writes children's books.
I know. I think Jimmy Fallon also writes children's books.
There is one of these massive, one of like the heads of the support of critical race theory in the nation. I can't remember his name for the life of me. He's written a lot of books, both for adults that kind of like more explicitly lay things out, and then for children. And it is, here's a word that people like to misuse all the time. It is indoctrination.
Yeah.
If I, as a thinking adult, can look at it, and again, I don't have text in front of me, otherwise in a different episode I'd be willing to go through it and break it down, because I think that's important.
Is that what this podcast is going to turn into?
No, not at all.
Race theory?
I'm just, oh my gosh.
It's supposed to be lighthearted, man.
It's scary to me.
We were talking about Bigfoot last time.
That's true. Oh yeah. Well, I'm going to flip the switch in a second. It's scary to me that this is just being given to children that aren't being taught how to think about it. And if you look at certain demographics where it's being put in, this is a statistical thing. The general mental sharpness is not where it should be. Yeah. That's scary.
We most definitely shouldn't be teaching this thing, not because like it's not necessary, but because like for children, young children, like, 4, 5, 6 years old, we shouldn't be teaching them what is wrong with the different like interaction between races in our country or whatever. We should be teaching them just be nice to everyone.
These are humans just like you.
They're human
it's
beings.
Cool. They're different colors.
Yeah.
That's it.
Humans come in different colors.
It's literally that. Like,
because like fucking taking this to just another thing, like when you see videos of like white people not necessarily touring, but like
white people.
Let me finish. But it's like, white people going and like exploring, say, like the deep heart of like Africa.
Okay.
And you have like, black adults, black children seeing white people for the first time in their lives. At first, they are a little scared because it's just like, this is a person that looks completely different from me. But in damn near every video I've seen, they're not hateful.
No, not at all.
They're more or less just like, whoa, Yeah. One video that truly was heartwarming was a guy that went to, it was some, African tribe that we haven't had contact with in like decades.
Yes. And,
at first they were scared, and like one of the people they had with them was able to translate. They thought he was like, they thought he was dead. He thought he was a ghost. Yes. And eventually they just come up and start touching him. Like, it's just like, it's another human, but they just look different.
They're different, yeah.
It shows that, like, I'm not saying there's not racism in other countries, but it's just like, it's not as severe as like it definitely can.
You're not born with it.
Yeah, you're not born with it.
Yeah.
It's not as severe as it is in our country. Because, like, I'm thankful for where we grew up.
So am I, all the time, man. More and more, actually.
For those of you who don't know, like, if there is anyone that we don't personally know that's listening to this, we live in Monmouth County, New Jersey. I'm not going to do specific cities.
I already said it earlier, I think.
Did you?
I did. So it's kind of, I gave you a geographic location right there.
Whatever, fine. That's where we're from. The high school that we went to, or just the school district in general, is really nice because of the area that we live in. We definitely still have people that have their prejudices, but in general, I would like to think that a lot of us in this town are very accepting and open-minded because of the fact that we were like raised from kindergarten all the way up until the end of high school, surrounded by people of every single walk of life.
Oh, yeah.
In just one of our classes, we would have a couple black people, a couple Hispanics, Latins, Brazilians, Polish people, Indians, Egyptians. Like, you could just pin
one Egyptian.
But no. I definitely remember that there was twins.
Oh my gosh,
that wasn't until high school though.
They were really fucking smart.
That was scary how smart they were. That was impressive.
That wasn't until high school though. I feel like.
What was that?
I said they didn't go to like our middle school or elementary.
Yeah, no, they definitely like moved in later. But we get people coming in from all over the world all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just like, like we get to see and interact with all these people, and it's almost never in a hateful way. The only time you'll have people that are like fighting is if it's just like, two people that genuinely have like some sort of quarrel between them.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, oh, you scuffed my sneakers or whatever. I don't fucking know.
Yeah,
it's just
I'm
like
cut you. Yeah.
But yeah, like we never actually have an interaction where it's just like, I'm going to stay away from that person because they're from wherever, you know?
Yeah.
And like, I feel like more places of the world, well, not necessarily the world, but like more places just need to have that kind of experience. Getting to understand what it's like to be other people, because that's how we get, you know, the Southern warrior who hates black people with a passion, says we need them out of our country, blah, blah, blah. And they've never met a single black person in their entire life. You know?
Yeah.
Like the heart of Mississippi or whatever.
Perfect example.
Or Missouri.
I don't know if you've heard of Daryl Davis.
Fuck Missouri. No. I'm kidding.
Our only listeners from Missouri.
Yeah, really, all 6 of them.
I know who you are.
Have you ever heard of Daryl Davis?
I've heard the name.
So this is a picture of him right here.
Yes,
so,
yes, I've seen his TED Talk.
I'll explain this briefly.
TED Talk.
Exactly in the vein with what Shane was just saying. Daryl Davis is an African American man from somewhere else in the South.
Surprise, from Missouri.
Oh, he's born in Chicago, actually. He's still alive. He had a TED Talk. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast. He's been on some other shows, the news predominantly. He's a black man who began to, I forget what age, he wrote a book, if you really want to read it. And I think you should. I want to read it. It's called Clandestine, KLAN-Destin, Relationships, A Black Man's Odyssey in the Ku Klux Klan. So the long and the short of it is Daryl Davis goes into, I almost said infiltrates like he's a secret agent. No, he goes into the Klan meetings.
Well, no, he definitely like fooled him at first.
I saw a movie about this.
You may have. I don't know if they made one, but there might be. Yeah. He goes into the KKK rallies and meetings, and he just starts talking to people. And what's crazy, and he records them, and what's crazy is some of them are willing to talk to him. Now, they might insult him, or they might lay out why everything he's saying is wrong, but what's
like as a bit of like a context for the people that like haven't seen this and just need like a brief thing. It started out where he was talking with the Grand Wizard, like one of the leaders. Yeah,
that's where I was going.
Clan.
Yeah.
They never met in person up until one point where like they had just been talking over the phone, and he was asking to join, and they had tons of conversations and genuinely started to become friends. And it got to the point where like eventually they did meet in person. Obviously the guy was shocked, asked him to leave for a bit, but then after a while talked to him again. Yeah. And so then Daryl was able to go to rallies as his personal guest. Yes. Saying, this is the one black man you are not allowed to assault or anything.
There was definitely a movie about this.
Yes. There probably was.
I had that in the wrong order. Thank you. But one of the things that stands out to me in part of one of his dialogues with the Grand Wizard, whatever his name was, I forget, in the beginning of all this, was they're sitting down having a drink together. Yeah. And this Grand Wizard is like, just completely feels like he's in another world, and he says, I've never sat down and had a drink with a black man before. Yeah. And like, you pause and you take the time to recognize the complexities of your life, all the time that you've lived, everything you've ever thought and felt, and the ways that you've changed, and you realize that this man went through all this time. I'm talking about the wizard. Yeah. Went through all of that part of life. Add 30 years and not once encountered that man. And the first interaction he has is with Daryl Davis. And I think I forget how often they met, but eventually he just said, I can't do this anymore. And he gave up his robes. But do you know who he gave them to? Daryl Davis. Yeah. Davis keeps them in a very humble way as trophies in the sense. I don't want to say it that way and mischaracterize him. I don't mean it in a proud sense. I mean it in the sense of accomplishment. Like, yes, good things are being done.
He broke through to him and showed him that there is no reason to have a blind hatred for someone that you've never met.
And so many people following that, I don't know the full number, but I think it's at least 200 or so at this point, have relinquished their position in the Klan and said, this is ridiculous. Yeah. And that is all. And I want to bring this back to our main point. You know, you can take it from that. You can take it from, the Quran and Islam in Egypt. You can take it from the mind-body problem. It is this refusal to take oneself to look at yourself and to ask questions about, like you were saying, this existential dread. What am I? Because it's very comfortable to live your life and to just say, and this is what I was getting at before about the categories. Well, I'm a human being, and you don't think much about that. You might get taught, you're a carbon-based life form. You have, your DNA. Your DNA determines. And you're made up of chromosomes, DNA that determine your physical traits and all of this mess. And we have a general idea of what a human is, but you can't ignore the abstract questions like the mind body.
Yeah.
Why? Because they're real questions, and they're not just questions. They carry with them heavy, weighty implications. Like what happens when I die?
Yeah.
Not the moment of death, although that is important, but really the more pressing matter is what happens after I die. Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
Can know.
Nobody objectively knows with 100% certainty. Knows that. So, and the implications of that. Okay, so here, let me lay it out this way, right? The implications of.
Okay, I can end yours. All right, Lexi's gonna go. Everybody,
goodbye, sister.
Bye.
The implications of the idea that your life will go with Nietzsche's proposition that it's meaningless. You are a meat bag on a marble, and when you die and all of the human race is wiped out, the universe at large will be no different because of it.
Yeah.
You will have left no lasting impact other than some more space junk pulled out of the Earth and put out into the atmosphere and then beyond, having left orbit.
Quick break.
So, these questions have implications. It is foolish, and I will not be gentle with that term. It is foolish.
Tell him, Harry.
To not put the mirror in front of yourself. And I don't mean in some loose way where it's like, what are the things I want to be different about me? Where am I failing? No, beyond that, why do you want that to be different?
Yeah.
Why do you, whoever the you is, you Shane, you Harrison, why do you say this is good, but this isn't? Those aren't small questions. Why are they not small? Because guess what? If you die and that's it, live your life whatever the friggin' way you want. There's no obligation that you have to anybody else.
Exactly.
To listen. If you punch somebody in the face, eat their children, and flay their wife and take their money, if your life is meaningless and so is theirs, if you are a meat bag on a marble, don't you dare shed a tear when that happens.
Yeah.
Because why? You have no right. And I have no obligation to give a crap about you. And yet, inherently, we all get real upset when things don't go our way, don't we?
Exactly.
It's funny how we people love to press into. They either do it one of two ways. They either press morality and say that, yes, of course there's good and there's good and bad. Maybe they won't use the term evil, right? And they'll save that for certain people like Hitler, for example, or Stalin or Mao Zedong. Or they'll say there is no implicit morality or inherent morality in man, and you do whatever you want, except when you examine their life, they're lying. Because when things don't go their way, when injustice happens to them, they get upset. So evidently then, you don't actually believe that. What you believe is everything. How do I say this the right way? It's like we've talked about this. The what's true for you, but whatever's true for you isn't true for me.
Yeah.
That is a lie, because the second I tell you that, or what, I want you to live, I'll tell you, right? I want you to live your life. I want you to be really happy, believing what you believe. And so long as you act according to that and you act according to your truth, I'm happy for you. That's the kind of right life, that's the right life to live. A lot of people in America say that. I would venture to say that is predominantly the leading position.
I remember the way we worded it. Do whatever you please, live your life so long as it doesn't affect me.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly where I'm going, is that is the unspoken implication of that, is it is, you do everything you want to satisfy yourself, and this point where they don't say it is up until the point where it interferes with my pursuit of my happiness. And then all of a sudden, that whole structure of quote unquote morality, well, they don't want it to exist. Yeah. Because, I can't feel good now, but that person feels good. And all of a sudden you start to say that's wrong. Excuse me. Upon what grounds do you make that claim? And this is real though.
Yeah.
Because you take these claims and you realize either, you're running with Nietzsche as an example. You go with a lot of different ideologies. Either Nietzsche's right, or we have an inherent understanding of a thing called justice that has nothing to do with biology. And there's a concept somewhere, I'm not going to make an argument as to where yet, somewhere regarding justice.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when you start dealing with it would be called an abstraction. When you start dealing with abstractions, you go beyond philosophy. You start to deal with, let's whack the cable.
You're good.
What you start to deal with is religious truth claims, because those are truth claims. And guess what? Until they're dealt with, they are just as valid or invalid as any other truth claim in the world. Mm-hmm. Choosing to ignore, and I'm not to anybody, choosing to ignore them, and likewise as someone who professes faith, choosing to ignore claims in opposition to my position, right, my presuppositions, is foolish because it's unexamined.
Yeah,
you don't know whether or not it stands up to critique.
My favorite thing. This happened to me the other day.
Interesting.
So, you know how sometimes people will just leave like the little pamphlets where it's just like, you need Jesus in your life.
Like a track?
Yeah, kind of,
okay.
I think.
Yeah.
So like, I was working. I work at a bank. I work the drive-through. I come out of the room for just a second because, I wanted to take a drink or something.
Okay.
And I hear that one of the tubes comes in. And I was like, okay, someone's here. I go out, there's no one there. And I was just like, why'd someone send the tube in? I open it up and one of the pamphlets is in there.
Do you have it?
No, I tossed it. I tossed it.
Dang, I was a little curious to see.
It was pretty much just like the same thing as everything else, but I always love the way they're worded because of the fact that like the questions you may be asking about Christianity, they never have a straight answer. And they never have the answer that you need. Where one of them was like, how do I know to believe in Jesus or something along those lines, where it's just like, how do I know that I should believe in Jesus?
Okay.
And basically the answer they had was, you may be questioning yourself, but you were raised in like a Christian like household, which means like blah, blah, blah. So, I can't remember exactly how it was worded, but it literally did not answer the question, why should I believe in God and Jesus?
Interesting.
And another one was just like, how do I know that the words written in the Bible are true? And it was basically said, these are the words of God spoken to man. They are true.
Interesting.
And like every single one that I have ever read is always like that. It's the word of God. It's true. It cannot be proven otherwise. That's the big thing. It cannot be proven otherwise. And
that's a strong claim.
I hate that
that's
argument.
A broad claim to make.
I hate that argument because a lack of evidence does not justify the truth. I have a unicorn in my basement. Prove me wrong. It is the truth. You cannot prove me wrong.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that kind of thing where it's extremely frustrating to me on a more personal level, because when I tell people that, and again, that yes, I believe that that which is put forth in Scripture is true, and that Jesus Christ is Lord, and
yes,
from him, through him, to him all things were made. That is a very complex statement. We'll get to it at a different time. Point being, it's that kind of thing that they think about, and it sucks because they assume so much. Now I'm not sitting here saying, I'm offended because they. That's not what I mean.
Yeah,
it gets upsetting because sometimes it makes having a productive conversation more difficult. And now I'm more than willing, I hope to think I communicate this, I'm more than willing to sit down and honestly deal with those things and do the best that I can to answer those objections and to say, okay, well, here, let me try and help you understand what Scripture actually says. Because guess what? If you're going to deal with the Word of God, deal with the Word of God in print. Don't deal with what somebody else is saying about it. Sit down and read.
These are the exact conversations that we have had before.
Yeah.
I want to make a disclaimer, like with the statement that I just said, where it's just like, I hate when people use that, lack of evidence thing. Yeah. That's not to say this is why I hate Christianity, because it's not.
Yeah.
There are people that will use that same line of logic with anything, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Where it's just like, I have a girlfriend, you can't prove it. She moved away, she moved to Canada or whatever. You can't prove him wrong. We've all used that argument when we were in fucking middle school. Guys, I know you have. We
boy.
all have at some point.
Oh, boy.
But it's just like, I'm just saying I don't like that line of logic.
Because it's not logical.
Exactly. But it's just like, that's not to say that's why I hate Christianity. I don't hate Christianity at all. I hate those kinds of people.
Yes.
Because we have had long discussions about the words in the Bible.
Yes.
We have talked about, who or what God actually is.
Yes.
We have spoken to why you can never prove that he exists or not. Well, because technically they are not human. They cannot be gendered, the personification of it, he. But just talking about that sort of thing is what I love. That's what I love, these conversations, just because we come from two different walks of life, kind of. And it's just like, I believe in my thing, you believe in yours, but we interact with each other in a way where we learn from each other and can start to understand maybe misconceptions that we had. Like, again, you explaining what God is, why we cannot prove that they do not exist, and what it means to be holy. And then from the other end of it, I have helped you understand, what quantum mechanics are, how different points of physics works. And my favorite conversation that we had, me explaining to you the exact basics of how a computer works.
Oh my gosh.
What ones and zeros actually mean. Yes.
Dude, I don't mean to interrupt you, but that I realize we're sideways here somewhere, but
that was the end of my point. We got to wrap up pretty soon anyways.
Yeah. So all to say to that computer conversation was, I will never forget that. That was so huge to me. Thank you again. I know I've said it all the time, but sincerely, that's huge. Yeah. Thank you. Now, I got a bit off course with the dealing with
the salt shaker.
Just the ignorance of truth claims that are in opposition to your presuppositions.
Yes.
Now, the reason I brought all of that up was to deal with the salt shaker thing, where the question inherently is, again, I word it this way: what is the difference between a salt shaker and myself as a human being? And we try and qualify that. Again, it's all these little assumptions about, the type of the atom matters. And I'm not saying that it doesn't, but I'm just citing what people would say, responses. The type of the atom matters, the concentration of those atoms, we can come up with any number of things. We qualify people as more complex. We say that these things are things that have that bear significance as to the distinction.
Yeah, we are orders of magnitude more advanced and complex than a salt shaker.
Yeah, between the thing that is a salt shaker and the thing that is a human being. Now, we're going to stop. And this is why we left off in this idea with the corpse thing.
Yes.
It's interesting that you brought up the microbiome. Because again, are you incorporating? This is a rhetorical question, maybe not. Are you incorporating that into the definition of human being?
Yes.
Or are they separate entities that are inside a human being?
I would argue to say that they are you, because the reason why I say that is just if you were to pluck one cell out of your body, like one skin cell or whatever, that is an individual living thing.
Yes.
It might not survive very long because it has evolved to need blood from your system.
Of its necessary system. Yes.
It will die soon, but it is technically its own thing. It has its own organelles. It has its own nucleus. It has its own membrane. Yes. It is its own life.
Yes.
All of the bacteria that are within your gut, all of the bacteria living on you, in you, wherever, they are all still technically you. I will argue that they are you more than you are yourself. Because you'll notice you have a certain diet for a while, you eat something different, you feel like shit. That's not because you consciously decided to feel different. It's because the other part of yourself decided, this is different than what we're used to. We need to adjust real quick. Sorry, this is going to hurt. We have to adjust. Your gut is more of you than you are.
Yeah.
That's kind of my whole thing. You can't just ignore it and say it's not you.
No, I would venture to say that you can't ignore it. Yeah. Would I be willing, and I'm not going to get into all this right now, but I just wanted to come back to what you said. would I be willing to flat out say at the moment that it is part of you? I personally would not. I think there's a distinction to be made, but regardless.
That is something I'd like to discuss.
Yes.
Like, what do you think is the distinction?
Well, and that's part of what I'm getting at with the, excuse me. I keep feeling like I'm going to fall backwards. With the salt shaker thing is just, these are two masses of atoms, right? And I want to step way the frig out. I'm talking zoom out, and not to ignore, but to zoom out in order to rightly, clearly understand and define these categories that we put matter into. Yeah. Because no matter what you call it, no matter what shape it takes on, no matter what else it's bonded to, those subatomic particles that I mentioned way the frig before, that are
90 minutes ago.
Yeah, really. Oh my gosh. That are in fixed relationship with the four fundamental forces that are acting upon them. Because they are like is it preons?
What?
The two ups and one down, but there's like
quarks.
Yes, I know they're quarks, but I thought there was maybe I'm forgetting the name. We'll say quarks for now. Those quarks, okay.
You're talking about freaking what is it, muons?
Is that what I'm talking about?
I think it is. It's either a muon or I'm going to look at the chart. It's going to bother me.
I saw it earlier and I can't remember. Whatever the specific quarks are that are involved in the constructions of protons and neutrons, I know it's two up and one down and then the inverse for the neutron. That subatomic particle, I think...
Fermions,
okay. Yes. My understanding from what I was reading earlier is beyond those, all of it is entirely theoretical at this point.
Yes.
Okay. So... which means we have no physical, like...
Yeah, we can see atoms. We can't see quarks yet.
Yes. So they are theorized.
Yes.
Which is important.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those subatomic particles are in a fixed relationship with these forces.
Yes.
Which means if you were to change them, that relationship shifts. And why am I saying this? At the fundamental level... this is why I'm trying to remove categories for now, the things we apply to that which is around us. At the fundamental level, I shouldn't be clapping, sorry. There's fixed relationships.
What you're trying to say at the end of all this, I want to assume, is that we are all the same on the most fundamental level. What makes us different? Am I wrong?
The first half of that is correct.
Okay.
I don't want to oversimplify it and make that the ending question the point, because that's not what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
It's to say that these relationships at the fundamental level are fixed, and no matter what complexity you move through as something, increases in size and density in different types of atoms, those atoms at their building block level have a fixed relationship with the forces around them.
Yeah.
The number of atoms and the number of subatomic particles, that are involved in the construction of these atoms, when the number changes and the structure of the atom regarding those subatomic particles changes, that's when that balance happens. Why? Because there's a difference in number of fixed relationships that don't change. Now, why am I saying that? I'm saying that because at the fundamental root level, they are slaves. They are slaves to these forces.
Not where I thought this podcast was going, but okay.
I could smell that coming out of your mouth. Dang it.
Didn't know we were going into slavery now. Quantum mechanics to slavery. That's a joke.
I would like to, for the record may reflect that Shane is the one that adopted the Southern accent. Harrison Stone did not. Take whatever implication from that you may. Anyway,
it happens to me.
No, don't let him defend himself.
I can't help that I get a Southern drawl sometimes.
Is it when you think about those things? Is that when it happens, Shane?
I watched too many Westerns as a kid. Shut up.
So, these things are slaves. They are enslaved to these forces.
Yes. Okay.
Regardless of the megastructure they take on.
Uh-huh.
They are enslaved to these forces.
Correct.
If I am inherently physical, there is nothing more. And I know it seems like I'm making a huge jump here, but I just walk with me. there is in that series of fixed relationships, regardless of the different balance of those forces, you don't get an impetus for action amongst me as a physical as a body of atoms that can act with some degree of independence or act to some degree despite these forces.
What causes life? Is that your question?
I would say the question I think more accurately would be, how are you defining life? How are you defining what it means for a thing to be alive? And I realize I posited the question of the salt shaker, maybe communicating that there would be an answer, but I think you do some of this thinking and some of this, what sounds like verbal gymnastics, but it's necessary. Though sometimes it can be done a lot cleaner, to get to a more specific question, because you need to work from these big, this is what I'm talking about, the examination thing. If you haven't thought like this before, that's a real question. It's not a stupid question. Yeah. What is the difference between me and a salt shaker? That's a very broad question, but you need to do this thinking to get to a more specific question to iron out a side.
Yeah.
So then you could do it again and again and again. And like I said, those branches earlier, when you start to think the branches, as they begin to cross over, you're starting to clear up something that you didn't even think about before. Yeah. And I think it's very necessary.
So going with the question,
Yes.
I'm running with the question, like what really defines life,
what makes the salt shaker inanimate and not alive? What makes me alive, though physically we're the same, regardless of categories of complexity? I
would almost say that it is because of complexity. If you look at any inanimate object, now I'm not really talking about things that are man-made because of the fact that the man-made things are made to be more complex.
So we're saying like organic complexity? Is that fair? Okay.
Because you look at your computer, it's capable of doing many things that a rock would not be able to do, even though if you want to be real technical about it, it's a chunk of silicon. That's all it is.
Yeah. But
what makes something capable of life, I would say, is natural complexity. You look at any inanimate object, whether it be, a rock or another rock or water or, another type of liquid, gases, they are simple.
Yes.
You can say yes, there are many different types of minerals and whatnot that have pretty complex structures where it's just like, nickel, sodium, cadmium, that I don't know if that's an actual mineral, but you know what I mean, where it's just like it has more things in it.
Yes.
And it has a crystal structure that is pretty complex.
Yes.
But when you think about it, it's very simple. It's just a simple thing that you can repeat. Mm-hmm. Life, on the other hand, in the most basic form, has to be extremely complex.
Yes.
And I would say that it is that complexity that is what gives life. There are plenty of molecules that you can find in the universe. We know that it exists. We know that there is methane in space. Yes. We know that there's ethanol in space. That's how we know that there is, the nebula that is made of rum.
And the space smells like burnt meat in the majority, apparently.
Yeah. But yes, those things are able to be made, but even like with complex molecules, they in themselves are not complex enough.
Okay.
We've talked about it before.
So, okay, to clarify, I don't mean to interrupt, but so you're saying we'll say the sodium, nickel, cadmium thing, there is a much lower degree of complexity in that molecule than there is in what? What's like, pick a thing that's a comparison.
Anything that we can consider alive.
So we'll say a cell?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
So think about a cell. We will do the smallest thing possible. Like one of the main debates that's going on right now about life is a virus alive? I'll talk about that because of the fact.
I've heard that.
Yeah. Yes, we don't know if viruses are alive or not. We can't determine if they are technically dead, alive, or were never alive in the first place, because they are just as complex as bacteria, the other thing that causes disease. They are just as complex, but there is one defining factor. They themselves cannot replicate. The
virus.
Yes. Viruses cannot replicate.
Yes,
they trick other things into replicating them for them.
Yes.
You can say that they aren't alive because of the fact that they themselves don't do anything. They depend on other things to do things for them. But
that's an interesting take on
yeah,
that.
But they are alive because they are genetic code. It's as if you took raw DNA and scrunched it up into a paper ball and threw it out into the universe. That's all it is.
I forget the technical terms for all those. I used to know all those. Very interesting, but
so I would say like complexity is a big thing, but like if you want to be real by the books, in order for something to be alive, it has to, I believe it's like it has to have a metabolic rate and it has to reproduce. And that's something that's alive. If something doesn't reproduce, it's not really alive because like it'll move around a little bit, but it won't do anything.
So that would be... Okay, so let me ask. Let me be more particular here because I think it's necessary for these definitions. That it is actively reproducing or that it has the capacity to do so?
Capacity.
That's important.
Yes.
Okay.
Because
and it has the capacity for metabolic function?
Yeah. Don't quote me on that.
No, I don't know. I'm trying to be
yes.
particular here.
Yeah.
I think it's important for discussion, even in this context.
Because metabolic in the sense that it takes things in from its surrounding, processes them to make energy, and spits the rest that it doesn't need out.
Yes.
Every single living thing on this earth does that. Okay. It needs that to stay alive. Some are more efficient at doing this than others, but everything needs to be able to do this.
Yeah.
And life doesn't need to be nearly as complex as we think it is, but it is. I say that in like, it doesn't have to be a fly in order for it to be alive.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to have been evolving for millions and millions billions of years in order for it to be considered alive. To say that, we have evidence for some of the earliest life on Earth. It was, tiny little bacteria scampering around in the early seas.
Frolicking.
Yeah. And the thing just a little side, I remember hearing a headline from a little while ago that blows my fucking mind. We have recently discovered the new oldest life form on Earth. Again, it was bacteria that evolved 4.5 billion years ago.
I heard that, yeah.
That means it's only a couple million years after the Earth was formed. The Earth is still cooling down from the early bombardment, and that's when life started to form.
So what's in that context? What's the proposed age? 13.7 billion years? That's
the age of the universe. 13.7. Yes.
Wait a minute.
The universe.
What am I thinking about?
The universe is 13.7 billion years old.
Okay, so it is. I don't know why.
The Earth is 4.5, around there.
It is 4. Okay.
Yes, 4.5, 4.6.
I think I had them switched.
4 point something. Point is saying that
Which doesn't make any sense, but I meant like the breakdown. Ignore me. My words aren't coming out right. It's not that I thought the Earth was older than the universe. I just, sorry.
But no, all of this to say that life can happen in this universe. Obviously, we're here. That shows that it happens. But it's also saying like we don't need anything super specific to do it. And what justifies life is complexity. Life, I would say, what defines life is the opposite of entropy. We exist.
Define entropy.
The natural decay of everything. Everything will eventually break apart and die.
So, okay, and I'm doing this thoroughly because I think it's necessary. I don't mean to be obnoxious.
Yes.
So the breakdown from what to what?
Literally anything. The breakdown of absolutely everything. What I mean by that is you can talk about entropy as in a mountain breaking into pebbles. You can
find a technical definition, but continue.
I'm doing this as like, kind of like metaphor.
Yeah, I understand.
A mountain breaking down into pebbles. If you release a gas, say this is a gas canister, and I open it up, it will eventually spread out evenly through the environment it's in.
Yes.
That is entropy. It's spreading, breaking down, and getting everywhere.
Okay.
And entropy happens to everything, to the point where I'm sure you've heard of one of the theories of the end of the universe, like the heat death of the universe.
Oh, of course.
That is entropy in its purest form.
Yes.
All of everything is equally spread out. There is no heat. There is no nothing. Everything is spread out perfectly evenly.
As far as the particular distribution of energy, which would be, if we're running with the theory that energy cannot be created or destroyed, there is a limited
energy
distance,
in its purest form.
There is a limited distance to which the universe could expand until it cannot be effectively energy cannot be effectively shared between particles.
Yes, that is entropy in its purest form. And I would say life is the opposite of that. Because you take a look at things that are alive, we are purposefully gathering things from around us, be it food, water, air, everything, bringing it to ourselves so that we can keep ourselves in one piece. We are keeping ourselves together. We are actively acting against entropy. If we just stopped, we would die, we would decay, we would break apart. We are the opposite of entropy.
Okay, well, I'll read the technical definition in a bit. Two things. Number one, I would say I have to give some pushback on that last statement, only because, and this actually leads into the first point, we don't... I wouldn't even say that we are fighting entropy when something is alive, because you die anyway. I mean, you're aging, you're not getting better.
I'm not saying that we're like perfect at it.
Yeah.
Like eventually, like life in its pure, not its purest form. If we were to like say that there was a perfect life form, it would be one that never dies. Right? We can all probably agree on that. Being immortal, like that is basically the perfect life because you never die. And you're never decaying. You're never giving into entropy.
I would go so far as to say there's no potential for that.
Yes.
That would make
there's
it
no
perfect.
potential for entropy.
Yes.
You are eternal. You will live forever. You are living forever. What defines life? Fighting and working against entropy. We're not perfect at it, obviously. Then, because we are able to fight against gravity, but we don't do it perfectly. We're not flying around wherever we want, but we work against it to do the stuff we need.
Okay, and this is going to sound like word sparring. I don't mean it to, but it's important. This is what
Fight me.
This is what I do.
Fight me.
God, this is what I do, or try to effectively. Anyway, if something has no potential to be subject to entropy, it isn't fighting it, because by nature it doesn't have the potential for that. So there's no resistance to happen because it cannot do it. So, and I'm saying this because if this is how we're defining this organism, right, now you have to redefine life.
It would be a different form of life, yes, but with what you were describing, there currently is no inanimate object that is able to completely resist entropy. Even the things that we describe, like we think of as being immortal.
Of course not.
Say black holes.
If it's physical, it breaks down.
Even then, like black holes that take things in to feed themselves, we would say that's alive, but it is not fighting entropy forever.
Yeah.
And it can't reproduce.
Yes.
And eventually it will die. It'll take trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of years. They will be the last things to die, but they will, because we have evidence that they are slowly losing their mass and they are slowly spreading out.
Yes.
Everything will die.
Yes.
And if there is something that can perfectly act against entropy, we can consider that life to some extent. It would be the perfect life form. In the sense that it would redefine life, because technically it would not have to reproduce. The perfect life form wouldn't have to. Then again, we do have life forms on Earth already that don't have to. I'm pretty sure there's some like species of jellyfish that is technically immortal. Once it comes to the end of its life, it just reverts back into a pupa.
Yes, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah. But it's capable of reproducing.
It has the capacity to.
Yes.
Okay, well, here is where we start to delve more into the abstract.
Let's save that topic for another episode, because like Lexi texted me. Yes, so leave that for the next episode. We'll talk about what is life. Okay. Write that down.
I will make a note. Do you want like a final comment? A short one. I can give you a short one.
Go ahead.
Okay, so long and the short of it, we have dealt with what it looks like to live a life that is unexamined, and the foolishness of such a pursuit, and the necessity of examining all of life and never settling on your presuppositions, but instead questioning why it is you believe what you believe, whatever that may be. We started off with the salt shaker question. We took a long winding route around a lot of different things, but I think if you listen carefully and consider what's been discussed, they do all interrelate. The main question here, beyond the salt shaker simply being, I think we kind of just covered in the last second here, and Shane presented the question, what is life? Define what it means to be alive.
Yeah.
Because, again, implications being, if this is more than, if the universe has more than strictly a single physical component, those are weighty implications, because now the real question you're left with is, what is it? Like you said earlier.
Yeah.
What happens when I die? And I think ultimately, and this is my last statement here, in human experience, you know, I don't think death is the thing that you were afraid of. I don't think anybody, and this is a broad statement, and I'm more than willing to be wrong.
Come on, wrap it up.
I don't think anybody's actually afraid of death itself. I think the fear, if you really press it, is what happens after.
Yeah.
Everything dies. We have no reason to be afraid of it.
Exactly.
I think it's what happens after. So
some people are trying. Some people are trying their best to not die, but it's going to happen.
You don't
eventually.
have a choice. Yeah.
Even if you're like a freaking multi-billionaire, you are going to die eventually. You hear that, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos? You are going to die.
You get that, Jeff?
You are going to die, and there's nothing you can do to stop it.
No matter how much you wax your bald head. Who said that? So, pardon the derailment, but thank you for bearing with me.
Yes.
I think this was valuable.
And fuck Missouri.
Okay. Let the record show. Shane said that. I did not say it.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.